let's take a look at what are the elements that make up sexual harassment. If somebody says something, is that harassment? Is it sexual harassment? How does sexual harassment differ from other kinds of harassment? It's a big deal. U.S. Merit Systems, they did a study in 1980 and 1987. Keep in mind, the first case that was decided by Supreme Court was 1986. They found that 42% of federal employees reported some type of sexual harassment in each separate survey. Is that unusual? Well, okay, now we have Working Woman, New York Times, National Law Journal and Parade. They show about 40 to 70% of women are harassed in different contexts. I wanted to get a little bit more specific, so I did the research on my own here, and I wanted to look at some of the aspects as to what percentage is happening in what category. Harassment. About 35% of women globally experience some form of harassment at work. Microaggressions, where somebody has a perception of it, 43%. Sexual harassment. About 4% of women say they have actually had full-blown sexual harassment at work based upon their sex or trying to sit down and have some type of sexual relationship by employees in the workplace. Harassment by customers. 16% have been harassed by customers or clients. And then during work travel, 10% of women have been harassed while traveling to work. I have heard numerous different cases. I had a case where I had two faculty members went to a conference, and the one was being pursued relentlessly by women that wanted him to sleep with her during the conference. So yes, almost always it's the male aggressor, but don't make that assumption. About 16% of the cases are men filing against other men or women. So do not make an assumption that you know all about it because of the fact that the vast majority of them are men on women, but sometimes it is the other. Keep your eyes open, pay attention to what's going on. You might even have a delivery driver coming into your place, dropping off a box on a regular basis, and he sits there and starts flirting with women in the workplace, or vice versa, women with a guy, and then it goes awry and you get a sexual harassment complaint. Is that covered? Well, yes, we'll talk about that at a later point because that's a third-party harassment, but it happens, it happens, it happens. Consent. Is it consensual? I've seen cases where there was clear flirtatious behavior by both parties going back and forth, and then one of them goes a step too far and all of a sudden it's sexual harassment. The other person says, we've been talking like this nonstop. And if you work in any kind of office that receives complaints about harassment, you will receive a complaint. Recently I heard somebody talking about the aspect of a woman was talking about this, and how she likes this type of sex, and he responded about something about him, and all of a sudden she's filed a complaint, even though she's the one that initiated the sexual language, but she didn't like the way he said it, so therefore she filed a complaint. You'll have all kinds of different aspects of what does consent mean and who opens what door in the language barrier, and then how far does it go and the whole process. The company risk increases if one supervises the other monumentally, because now you have more at play than just a dynamic of two sexual beings. You have a sexual being with power over the other one. When that happens, that's when it becomes that you cross that threshold into sexual harassment rather than flirtation. It's problematic when it's directed towards employees, when it becomes certainly unwelcome. Sometimes unwelcome comes at an unknown thing as, well, I never consented to this. Well, you went to dinner with me, you did this, but I didn't. Okay, so you have to stop. Whenever one party says stop, you have to stop. Several states now mandate regular supervisor and general employee training, and while I don't think that we should have state or the federal government interfering in the workplace, I think it's sound advice to have an annual, at least every other year, of all supervisors being trained on this aspect. I think every other year also, all employees should be trained on this. It's explosive, it makes everybody uncomfortable, and nobody should have to come into work and feel threatened or harassed on a regular basis. Two theories. Make certain that you understand what these are. Quid pro quo and hostile work environment. They're very similar, but they're not the same. In a quid pro quo situation, a supervisor or somebody in power or perceived power extracts sexual favors as a condition of employment or promotion. We had this case with McDonald's just recently in 2021, where we had a CEO having sex with multiple different women in the workplace, and miraculously, every time they had a relationship with them, then they got a promotion later on. Everybody that saw the contact, they were involved, they saw it happening, and it really took years before it caught up with the whole aspect because people will be quiet and they'll all whisper, but nobody steps forward and files a complaint. Because a lot of times that complaint results in them being blamed for something inappropriate in the process. So the distinction between the two terms doesn't need to be rigid according to the Supreme Court. So in general, most sexual harassment takes place between males and females, with the male as a harasser. Yes, that's kind of how it all works, the vast majority of it. One case, the harasser and harassee need not be different genders. Sometimes it's the same gender. So pay attention to that. Male employees can be harassed as well, 16.3%. 6% of claims reach court trial, with really the harassees win about 1 out of 3 cases. The probability of somebody filing a case and winning it isn't all that good. So the aspect of 6%, but you know what? There's 94% of the claims that don't go to trial court. That means there's an awful lot of settlements happen. So make certain you're training your people because you don't even want to go to the settlement aspect of it. You want to focus in that it simply doesn't happen, or when it does happen, quick action takes place. Quid pro quo, harasser requests sexual activity for benefits. The obvious is the most obvious type, but it's not difficult to recognize. It's pretty easy. So sometimes you'll have Ball State University versus Vance. The harasser has to have the authority to hire, fire, and not just direct work assignments. So you have that kind of a dynamic. Is what does power mean? Okay, if you have a group and you have even something as simple as custodians and you have a group leader that is not a supervisor, they're still in the same working group, but the one person demands sexual favors, doesn't get it, and gives the other person one of the worst assignments possible. That also is power. So anytime that you have sexual harassment complaints with one of them directed against a person in power, pay even more attention than you normally would, because then you have a link between a retaliation act because of the lack of a quid pro quo sexual harassment case. A hostile work environment is very similar, but the harassment creates an abusive, offensive, or intimidating environment for the harassee. Now, they don't have to be asking for sex. It could be they just don't like straight people. So therefore, boom, you have that. They don't like women. Boom. They don't like men. Boom. You have to pay attention to both. Sex, actually pursuing sex is not necessary to have a hostile work environment, and that is sexual harassment. So you have the two different aspects. Prima facie elements, those are the basic elements. The harassment's unwelcomed. It's based on gender. Okay, and like I said, you can be of the same gender. Okay, the harassment is so severe or pervasive, it creates an abusive working environment. Somebody, when they walk in the front door, they cringe because they know what the day is going to hold. They don't want to deal with it. They become sick. A lot of times, if you have real good, solid sexual harassment case, you can look at the evidence and see a pattern where somebody, they dreaded coming into work to the point that they called in sick on a regular basis, and it was different from the pattern before they worked in with that individual. So you have that aspect of it. The harassment affects the term, condition, or privilege of the harassee's employer. The employer had knowledge that it was going on. When you have knowledge, as soon as you have knowledge, that means somebody tells you. Keep in mind that having knowledge is a court procedure. If they bring somebody else up, well, yeah, I told that to Human Resources 3 years ago. He's always been doing this. Pretty much that one testimony, if it's factual, will sink you, and you better make certain you settle it beforehand, because the jury will listen to those kind of testimonies, and you'll be sitting there wondering, oh, well, what happened? Well, I kind of knew about it. I wasn't certain. Okay, you'll be explaining it in the process. Make certain when you have knowledge, you need to deal with it. Don't hide it. These things don't get swept underneath the carpet. You need to sit down and deal with it. Quid pro quo, some type of benefits promised and given or withheld from the harasser by the harassee. Okay, so you have that versus the hostile sexual environment. You have the aspect of because they have that sex. Okay, you're picking on them, so you have the difference. One is totally I want sex. The other one is you're creating an environment that's hostile. You may have a quid pro quo situation that did not manifest itself, then it rolled into a hostile environment. So you have those aspects of it. Here's probably the most famous one. And if you go out historically, this is the President of the United States having sex in the Oval Office with an intern. This is worthwhile going back to see the interest of the media as well as the American people. People ended up blaming Paula Jones more than he did Bill Clinton. So you have that aspect of it, even though there's probably no position on planet Earth more powerful than a presidency. So all of a sudden you have that aspect going on there. So you have multiple cases with that. So sexual harassment, keep this in mind. Number one is primarily directed towards women. Two forms: quid pro quo, hostile work environment, and know this that consensual relations are not covered by Title VII. It's when they become unconsensual and there's a difference in behavior and a difference in expectations in the process. Sexual harassment, it's here, it's going to be here, long time to come. Learn to deal with it so it doesn't happen at your place of employment if at all possible. Take care.